Well, good evening, everyone. This is Steve Revelak, the first mate of the Massachusetts Pirate Party. With me tonight is Captain Jamie O'Keefe
Ahoy.
and our quartermaster, Joe.
Yo ho ho.
So we want to thank you all for joining us on Sunday night as usual. And this week we've got a couple things to talk about, but I think sort of what we want to open with is the Biden administration's decision to basically forgive. I think it was up to $10,000 of federal student loan debt. Um, this seems like a good thing. What do you guys think?
Mixed feelings, not gonna lie, because uh, when we're talking about student loan forgiveness, what about all those trade schools? Does it not apply to them, or like, what if
It
you're
does.
right at trade school, and then you're going to get your truck, you know? And this is a lot of the arguments that I've been hearing. Uh, why this is why are we discriminating against college-bound kids versus trade school kids or even trucking kids? And there's a crisis right there.
Yeah, my understanding is it is not limited to college. It is limited to any educational debt that someone incurs after high school. I may be wrong. It may even include high school if you went to a high school that will require that you incur some debt. Although 18, probably it's your parents with it. And so if you were someone who went and took a program to do cosmetology or to do hairdressing, actually, maybe that is cosmetology. Sorry, uh, or being a trucker, that educational debt, 10,000 of, provided it was done through the federal government, um, the education department, then you could remove $10,000 of that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, this seems pretty beneficial, especially happening now. I mean, student loans, federally funded student loans. I mean, they're not something one can liquidate through bankruptcy. They follow you and follow you and follow you, and if you die, they follow your next of kin. Um, having a group of people, especially with the way that post secondary education has gotten more and more expensive over the last couple of years. You forgive debt, and this either gives someone an opportunity to you know invest in a house. It gives them more money to it gives them more expendable cash. It puts money in it. To me, I see this as something that can relieve a lot of stress, help people make ends meet, and at the same time put some money back into the economy, which you know it would not be a bad thing at the moment.
Yeah, it was telling to me looking back. I pulled up from the Federal Reserve Fred database, and they looked at college debt from 2006 to the present day. And that's gone from about $400 billion to about $1.8 trillion dollars.
Really, 1.8. I remember it being big news when college debt surpassed $1 trillion, and so you're basically saying it's almost double that now.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
If assuming I'm reading the statistics correctly, but college, because college and other educational institutions have gotten so expensive,
Hmm.
people have to take on debt in order to do it. If you were a baby boomer and you went through that, you could get a minimum wage job and be able to pay for college and not incur vast quantities of debt. But, like going to the top tier universities, just as an example, is in the $80,000 a year. Going to even UMass Amherst is about $25,000, $30,000 a year. I mean, that's a huge amount of money.
Oh yeah.
And unless you're wealthy, you're going to have some debt. And so being able to remove that so people aren't burdened by it is important, because we can't set up a system where people are piling on debt and debt and debt. You know, if a debt becomes too onerous, it will simply not be paid.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. There's, you know, to just sort of put it in perspective a little bit. You were talking about, you know, the cost of a top tier university being about $80,000 a year. So when I came out to Boston, it was to go to college. I went to music school at Berkeley, but I could remember, you know, walking down Com Ave with some of my friends and being around like Boston University, and someone had this really cool T-shirt. It was like a sports car going vroom, and you know it said Boston University, $0 to $80,000 in 4 years. Well, that was, I mean, you know, now that is, it ain't so bad. But you know, one of the funny bits of feedback, and you know, we'll get into the funny part later, is, you know, since, you know, we're Massachusetts focused, we do talk about Massachusetts personalities a little bit. Apparently one person who was really, 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 really unhappy with the student loan forgiveness was Curt Schilling. So Curt Schilling used to be was he a pitcher for the Red Sox? He played for the Red Sox.
He was a pitcher. He had the bloody sock in the World Series.
Yeah, so he, you know, after ending his career in baseball, he went on to video game development and started a company called 38 Studios. They were going to make games. They moved to.
I think they had made a game.
They had made a game. They moved to Rhode Island and managed to secure, I think, about $75 million in sort of state aid to move their business there and start up. And
loan guarantees.
Loan guarantees.
The state was on the hook. They wanted to do a second version of their software, and they figured it would take them many tens of millions of dollars to do it. So Rhode Island was like, oh, if you come here, we'll guarantee your debt for this new program, for this new game you're going to come out with.
Yeah, and unfortunately, 38 Studios subsequently went bankrupt, leaving Rhode Island on the hook for that, you know, $75 million. So when Curt Schilling took to Twitter to grumble about, you know, hardworking Americans that repay their debt, we'll just say that there was a lot of hands went up in Rhode Island. They're like, well, Curt, so let's talk about there are a million Rhode Islanders who have a $75 beef with you.
Sorry, go, Joe.
Sorry. I was just going to say, one thing I really do like about this new bill is the delay or the extra time they are giving you to pay back those things. I thought that was a nice touch, and I'd rather see more of that, where it's giving people that relief, that break to get back their debt. My concern is where
I missed part of that.
So
what's the delay?
I like there's a delay. They're making it so that you have until, I think it was the end of the year. I'm not sure exactly, but they're making it so that they have more time to pay back. They will push back that extension. December 31st to 2020, and resuming the payments in January. So if you were about to default, you're no longer, it basically prevents unnecessary defaults. So that was the one nice thing. My concern with this is, where is the money coming from? Are we piling it onto the debt? Are we increasing inflation? Are we paying this in taxes?
I mean, where's the money for helping the Ukrainian people? We put $40 billion in Lend-Lease, right?
That's kind of, as far as I understand it, we basically, that $40 billion in debt isn't directly going to Ukraine. It's going to U.S. manufacturers to send over their weapons.
No, absolutely. But my point is, if we're sending them thousands of Javelin missiles and thousands of HIMAR rockets and thousands of 155 millimeter ammunition, that's coming out of our current stocks, and we have to spend money to replenish that.
Yes.
Right. And so and the larger point is, when Trump came in 2017, he got a tax cut for the wealthy that his party supported, that the Republicans supported, that some Democrats supported, and put yet more money, caused us to increase the amount of debt that we have to incur. And these people who are complaining about, helping people who have onerous debt to make that less onerous. They didn't have any problem with giving billionaires even more freaking tax breaks.
Yeah, there's one of the things that was a little unusual, a certain congresswoman from Georgia was expressing her dismay about the loan forgiveness program, and the White House's official Twitter account pointed out that, her company had basically taken federal aid under the form of, what was it, the PPI loans or something along those lines. So it's kind of, I think there is a little bit of a level of, hypocrisy involved. Ultimately, what I think there's the bigger question of, we, in the United States today, basically elementary, middle, and high school, this is something that's considered a public good. It's typically funded by municipal property taxes and state aid. But, if you live here, you are more or less entitled to 12 years of education. And, the way that, things have sort of moved on, there are quite a few instances where, 12 years of you need more than that in order to have a certain amount of careers. College used to be sort of, just for a relatively small group would go into colleges. I mean, you had your doctors and your lawyers and that sort of thing. But for the most part, a college degree was not necessary to be employable. And in a lot of fields, and I'm not just college, but I mean, it could be trade schooling as well. These days, to be employable, typically often requires something beyond what you'd learn in high school. And, one of the sort of the bigger underlying question is, when, should some level of post-high school education be considered, something that is, the responsibility of society provide. So, I mean, it might be the equivalent of a couple of years at a community college or state university, but it's something I think, should be on the table for discussion over the next couple of years.
Well, Steve?
Yeah, go on.
Oh, no, go ahead, Jamie.
I mean, I agree with you, but the thing I'm going to hark back to is, like, if you look at what corporations have done, they tend not to train internally.
Yes.
They want to pick someone else so either another company or the individual themselves have gone and trained themselves, and they want to reap the benefit of that. Okay. Now, if you were in the 50s and 60s and 70s, you could expect to be trained by your employer. Employers don't want to do that, right? They don't. It's like they're not responsible to us. We're not responsible to them, and that conveniently helps them. If you look at the cost of college for someone who is a baby boomer, right?
Oh yeah.
It is, you literally could, for some schools at least, you literally could work a summer job and be able to pay for your college. right? And that's not what we have now. So you have to factor all of those things in. This country used to put in a lot of money into public education, but Nixon and the Republicans were like, oh crap, we have all of these baby boomers who are objecting to us in the Vietnam War. Well, if they're saddled with debt, then heck, they're not going to be complaining about things as much. And we saw that happen in the 80s and the 90s and so forth. And so we, as a society, have chosen, in essence, or have allowed our leaders to choose a system whereby the government doesn't invest in you and corporations don't invest in you. And so in order to get ahead, you have to take on massive quantities of debt, which conveniently is loaned to you from the 1% who already are paying enough taxes anyways. So anyone who complains, I certainly am not going to listen to the Curt Schillings of the world. I'm not going to listen to Betsy DeVos, a billionaire who married another billionaire, go and talk about, oh, this is harming the working class. I'm like, these fuckers have been harming the working class for fucking 40 years, man. I don't have anything to say about them. One thing, I'm sorry, I've kind of dominated this, but the one thing about Curt Schilling, I'll say, the guy has a really thin skin. Like, we tweeted him about, hey, what about that $75 million you left for Rhode Island? And he responded with, well, that was the responsibility of Rhode Island. I didn't, he did not force them to make that loan. And if they had had better judgment, they wouldn't have done that. And it's like, well, then technically anyone who's lending a college student or a student who's paying for education for truck driving or whatever, and they can't pay it, well, tough noogies, we should just wipe out that debt free. So they made that choice, right? It worked for Kurt. Why can't it work for millions of other people?
So I never realized this. You're telling me that Curt Schilling blocked the Massachusetts Pirate Party's Twitter account?
Yes. Once we pointed out that he's a fucking hypocrite. Yes, we did.
Based. So, Joe, I think there was something involving China that you wanted to discuss about. Shall we go into that?
Not quite yet, because I have a brilliant solution. Why don't we have a nursing shortage crisis right now, right?
Yeah.
So why don't we start making nursing courses paid for by the state? Let's put our money where our mouth is. Okay, we have a shortage of crisis. We put a limited program, like only so many people can get into this program. You have to have good grades, etc., whatever other scholarships that they throw out there. But then we make their college experience 4-year nurses for an RN, paid for, free, done. We don't have a shortage of nurses no more.
I don't have a problem with that. I will point out, back a couple of years back, there was a ballot measure that would limit, before COVID, there was a ballot measure that would limit the number of nurses, or it would limit the number of patients per nurse. And the whole complaint was, oh, well, we're not going to be able to get enough nurses for this. And then COVID, and so it didn't pass. And so COVID hit, and now nurses are leaving, or they're going and figuring, oh, I can be a floating nurse and I can make twice as much money that way than working for a particular hospital. And so, again, it comes to the corporation. They made the choice to underpay people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's like when we were talking before about the situation with truckers. We know about Amazon workers driving around trucks who are usually subcontractors anyways, having to pee into bottles because the schedule is so onerous. But, long haul truckers, it's difficult for them as well. They're not making a lot of money. The corporation has them on the hook for renting the truck, for potentially the courses they have to take, any number, gas expenses. When my grandfather was a Teamster, he in his 60s was able to get a pension and get out of that. But we're just saying, oh no, you're a trucker in your 70s? Yeah, keep going till you die.
Mm-hmm.
Now, going into the whole like craziness that China has stirred up with this whole international stuff about Taiwan, I've been tracking some of the international news pretty hardcore these last few weeks, specifically in Ukraine, but more terrifyingly so in China. And China was so terrified of an 80-year-old woman bringing democracy to the small island of Taiwan, even though we fully disclosed that we weren't getting involved with that. They still wanted to kick their feet up in the air and do this huge stomp and send in missiles and send in planes to go stuff. Now, if anybody knows anything about China, they love just pushing the boundaries of the countries and poking the bear of the countries around them, right? We're always hearing about like things going on with them and fighting Indian soldiers. Like there was those 100 soldiers that were badly wounded, and they didn't even use guns. They were like fist fighting and knife fighting in India on their Indian-China border. So the latest thing for those who haven't been keeping up is Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, went to Taiwan to meet with the leaders there. And in response, China did this huge amount of foot stomping. I believe the term is saber rattling.
Mm-hmm.
And they held a bunch of drills shooting missiles over, invading Taiwan's airspace and making them scramble their jets and being on high alert. They even went into Japanese airspace and started poking the Japanese bear. And now, because of that, North Korea was doing the same thing, getting ready for World War III, making South Korea. So now, I guess that the US, South Korea, and Japan have been doing joint task force training in response to all of this, getting ready to go to war down there. On top of that, Japan's fueling up all their missiles. So instead of going 100 kilometers, they are now going to be ready. They just signed a bill so that they will be ready to launch for 1,000 kilometers. That means they'll be able to hit targets in North Korea and all across China. And they're loading up these missiles all across their little chain of islands that connects basically Japan to Taiwan, and are just increasing their capacity. I think that with all this foot stomping and saber rattling, we're paying attention, and we're probably more ready than they really want us to be for all of this. And so it makes me very, very nervous as to what's going on there. But as always, I'll keep on paying attention, and if there's anything more to that, we'll definitely let you guys know, and gals, and peoples.
Yeah, it's funny. I sort of consider that, the country that now China and North Korea are far from the only ones who've done this, but you've violated our diplomatic sovereignty or whatever, and we're gonna make a little bit of a hostile gesture. It's kind of like trolling, right? Where you do this, yeah, we're going to troll you, and someone else trolls you, and it's like you said, it's a bunch of saber rattling. But until it turns in
just ballistic missiles, sure,
just ballistic missiles, as long as they don't hit anything, anything inconsequential. It's funny. I'm in the middle of reading a book about sort of China during the 1930s and 1940s. So. When it was invaded by Japan in the 1930s, this was sort of even pre-World War II. And then, the rise of the Chinese Communist Party, the Kuomintang, and, how the United States and Russia sort of vacillated support between the different groups. And I think that in a couple of chapters or two, we're going to actually get into the CCP's rise for power. But it's like the political history of that area is pretty damn complicated. I mean, the one takeaway I have was, so far from that, when, during our involvement there in World War II, when we were campaigning against the Japanese and looking to, get some support for China, both to have them fight the Japanese army because the Japanese army had invaded, and also to provide like logistic and staging areas for, what we sort of predicted was, an inevitable, invasion of Japan itself. The one thing that I think it seems like the folks from the United States who were over there, the diplomats, they just did not really, they saw things too simplistically. And really the relationships and the power dynamics here are pretty complex.
Absolutely. Hopefully we'll realize it's just as complex.
Well, the thing is going on in China right now, they have so many riots going on with their banking crisis, and they're just like a big ball of mess. The last thing that they need is a long established war. Mm-hmm. I mean, they may even need to go into a war just to kind of take the pressure off some of their internal pressures. Mm-hmm. And I, with all of my heart, I hope that's not the case. I hope everything just calms down and we can go back to doing business. I love all of my stuff that they were manufacturing. My kid loves every toy that we get from over there. And they have some of the weirdest candies. Let me tell you, I love them, but they're so weird. But
the Japanese have so many different Kit Kats.
Oh, the Japanese candies also. They're you get one of those boxes, the candy boxes, but that aside, I hope that both of our peoples are able to just work everything out. Mm-hmm. However, on some local news. Coming up is this Monday, tomorrow, is the last day to sign up for at-home mailing for your ballot in Massachusetts. And so I just wanted to bring that to our attention real quick before we wrapped up. Mm-hmm. So definitely go into mass.gov if you need at-home mail-in ballot, and make sure you get signed up, because the deadline's for tomorrow. Also, I think the primary is coming up very
September
soon.
6th. September 6th.
For submitting early, I think it's Friday, September 2nd to submit early voting ballots, and the primary is on the 6th. So, but yeah, applications for the...
Go ahead, Joe.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
I was just going to say applications for mail-in ballots are due by 5 p.m. tomorrow. So,
yeah, and if you have already voted, well, good for you. Well done.
Vote early, but not often.
Yes, we do not encourage mailer fraud or voting fraud.
In terms of our own schedule, on the 10th. We will have a Boston area meeting online. On the 24th, we're probably going to participate in the Extinction Rebellion Boston protests that'll go on then. On October 8th will be our party conference. At the moment, we're thinking just a day, but, we encourage people to submit their talks. There's a link in the description to the page about it, and we will consider, if we have enough talks, well, we'll make it longer. And just for folks to know, on the 22nd and 23rd of October is the Boston Anarchist Book Fair. It is all of the presentations and workshops will be online, but they will be at the Democracy Center in Harvard Square, Cambridge. if you want to come by and meet with different publishers or different groups. The Mesh Boston Network, which I've been a part of, will likely be there. So
I do have to say
Yeah.
the Anarchist Book Fair is one of the highlights of my fall. I'm looking forward to when the event can be held in the future, or held in person at some unspecified time in the future. But it's definitely a good place to pick up some reading material.
So with that, thank you very much for watching this. We hope you found it informative. You can find us at masspirates.org, where you can go and sign up for our mailing list. We don't spam you, but we do send them out periodically. As always,
Help us beat the algorithm. Help us beat the algorithm by commenting, liking, sharing. Share this video. Help us get the message out there, because we need you, and only you can make us great.
And with that, thank you, Joe. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Jamie.
I hope you all have a wonderful week. Stay cool. All right, we are clear.